Welcome to Movie Slice. Quick, fun recaps of your favorite movies. Sharp, funny, and to the point. Hit subscribe and get your perfect slice of cinema. At first, everyone thought it was just a regular infectious disease, but as the death toll skyrocketed, things quickly spiraled out of control. What's even more terrifying, those who died from the infection started coming back to life, attacking people in the streets with no sense of reason. Their grotesque appearances were no different from the zombies we've seen in movies. Now, for fans of zombie flicks, this kind of plot might sound a bit too familiar. Nothing new, nothing exciting. But the Philippines delivered something refreshingly different with a hidden gem. Day zero, because anyone bitten would also turn. The virus spread like wildfire. One person infected 10. 10 infected 100. And before long, the whole city was in chaos. Even high-security prisons couldn't escape the outbreak. A loud, blaring alarm jolts the prisoners from their sleep. Then suddenly, someone rushes into the cell block yelling. The wardens open the gates. We're free to go home. Confused but hopeful, the inmates rush toward the exit, only to freeze in terror at what's waiting outside. A group of zombies charges down the hallway. Within seconds, several prisoners are tackled and torn apart. Tamoy and Emin were just about to leave when they were frozen in place by the terrifying scene in front of them. Before they could even figure out what was happening, one of the bitten guards suddenly mutated, baring his teeth and lunging straight at them. Tamoy panicked, fumbling backward. But Emin, he reacted instantly, grabbing the zombie and slamming him to the ground with a textbook takedown, followed by a chokehold. Then, calm as ever, he reached for the handcuffs on the zombie's belt, and in just a few swift moves, had the mutated guard completely restrained. Turns out, Emin wasn't just any prisoner. He used to be a special forces operative, locked up after an operation went wrong and someone got hurt. But now with bloodthirsty zombies roaming the halls while everyone else was running for their lives, Emin stayed cool and chose to fight his way out. And he fought hard, crushing zombies with clean, powerful punches, each strike perfectly placed, every move sharp and decisive. Taoy, inspired by Emin's bravery, slowly built up the courage to join the fight. While Emin cleared the front, Tamoy followed behind, finishing off any stragglers. After a brutal, bloody battle, the two finally made it outside the prison. But what awaited them there was even worse. The number of zombies was staggering. Even the driver of the prison transport bus had turned. Without hesitation, Emin yanked the zombie driver out of the vehicle and the two dove into the front seat. He floored the gas pedal, tires screeching, and they sped away from the nightmare they'd just escaped. Only when they reached a relatively safe spot did they finally stop to catch their breath. At this moment, Emin was overwhelmed with worry for his family. He quickly pulled out his phone and tried calling his wife, but no one picked up. What he didn't know was that just a short while ago, their apartment had already been overrun by zombies. A sinking feeling hit him. His wife and daughter were likely in serious danger. Without wasting another second, he decided to head home immediately. Tamoy, with nowhere else to go, had no choice but to tag along. On the way, they listened to the car radio, piecing together bits of what was happening out there. The streets were a mess, totally deserted, filled with an eerie silence. At one point, they came across a barricade, clearly set up to keep the zombies out. With no way through, Emin had to reroute. After some effort, they finally arrived at the base of Emin's apartment building, only to find the front entrance completely swarmed by zombies. Luckily, Emin knew a small back door that led into the basement. He quickly pried it open. Tamoy, ever the thoughtful one, grabbed a couple of shirts hanging nearby. They were still in prison uniforms, and that wasn't exactly how you'd want to reunite with your family. Once they changed, the two began carefully sneaking through the basement, but what they found down there stopped them in their tracks. The pitch-black basement was filled with crouching zombies. Their bodies twitched erratically, their posture disturbing and unnatural. But strangely, when Emin's flashlight beam passed over them, they didn't react at all, like phones stuck in standby mode. Emin motioned for Tamoy to stay absolutely silent, and the two of them began inching forward with extreme caution. But the basement was just too dark, and despite their best efforts, Tamoy accidentally knocked something over. The loud crash echoed through the space, instantly stirring the horde of zombies. Panic surged through them as the undead screeched and rushed toward the noise. Emin and Tamoy bolted, ducking into a shadowy corner just in time. After a tense moment, once the coast was clear, they pressed on. Their goal was the 7th floor, Emin's apartment. The real danger was only just beginning. As they climbed higher, the lighting improved, but so did the tension. The hallways were tight and claustrophobic with stray zombies scattered all over the place. Thankfully, with the skills they'd picked up earlier, the two now moved confidently, weaving through the undead with careful, fluid movements. Just when it seemed like they'd make it without a hitch, Emin suddenly noticed something odd. There was movement inside a trash bin, tucked away in the hallway. Peeking inside, he was shocked to find a young boy hiding there. Emin and Tamoy didn't even hesitate. They had to help him. Emin gestured gently for the boy to come out and reassured him with a calm expression. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. The boy was still trembling with fear, unsure if he could trust them. So, Emin crouched and slowly waved his hand in front of a nearby zombie's face. Showing the boy firsthand, these creatures didn't react unless they heard something. Seeing that, the boy finally gathered his courage and climbed out of the trash bin. He took careful, slow steps forward. But right then, something went horribly wrong. From a dark corner they hadn't noticed, a zombie suddenly shot up without warning and let out a blood-curdling scream like a psycho alarm clock signaling mealtime. In an instant, every single zombie in the building snapped awake. The moment they sensed the living, they lost it, rushing toward the trio like rabid animals. Emin, Tamoy, and the boy immediately turned and ran. But the hallway ahead was a dead end. With no time to waste, Emin smashed the nearby fire hydrant case, grabbed the extinguisher inside, and unleashed a cloud of white powder into the corridor. The hallway was instantly filled with thick, blinding dust. The zombies, unable to see or pinpoint their target, froze in place. Taking advantage of the chaos, Emin grabbed a fire axe and began leading the way out, slashing through any undead that blocked their path. He moved quickly with the other two close behind, using the powder cloud as cover. But the powder didn't last long. As the air cleared, the zombies caught their sin again and came charging after them with renewed frenzy. At the last possible second, the three of them reached Emin's apartment. He slammed the door shut, locking out the undead swarm right behind them. Emin tore through the rooms, searching desperately, but his wife and daughter were nowhere to be found. All that remained was a large blood stain on the floor. A chilling dread crept into Emin's heart. He turned toward the door, ready to go back out and keep searching no matter what. But Tamoy quickly stopped him. Outside was crawling with zombies. Charging out now would be a straight-up suicide mission. Emin was overwhelmed with worry, completely helpless, until the boy suddenly spoke up. He said that during the zombie attack on the apartment, he saw Emin's wife and daughter on the third floor. That gave Emin a bit of hope. Meanwhile, Emin's wife, Cheryl, was desperately trying to evade a zombie chasing her through the building. In the chaos earlier, she'd gotten separated from their daughter, and now she was fighting for her life. But luckily, their daughter was safe for now. She had been rescued by a kind-hearted young couple who found her hiding alone. While helping her escape, the couple even ran into the building's police chief, who was also trying to make it out alive. Back on Emin's side, the hallway had fallen silent again, so he and the others decided it was time to move. They had to find Cheryl and their daughter. As they crept through the building, the boy suddenly caught a glimpse of his mother darting past behind them. Without saying a word, he took off after her. Tamoy noticed and rushed after him, leaving Emin standing there confused and alone. When the boy finally caught up to his mother, he was devastated. She was lying on the ground writhing in pain. It was obvious she'd been infected. Tamoy arrived just in time to see what was happening. He quickly grabbed the boy and pulled him away, slamming the door shut behind them and locking the now-turning woman inside. The two of them ducked into another room to hide, but the boy was in shock, completely distraught. He couldn't accept the truth and started freaking out, worried the noise would attract more zombies. Tamoy had no choice but to cover the boy's mouth and hold him tight. Eventually, the boy calmed down, and Tamoy slowly let him go. After learning that the boy's father was also missing and possibly dead, Tamoy made him a promise he'd do everything he could to help find his dad. Meanwhile, Cheryl had narrowly survived another zombie attack, but she was badly wounded. Before she even had a chance to catch her breath, she noticed a shadow slowly approaching. Thinking it was another zombie, she braced herself for the worst, only to realize it was Emin. Relief flooded her face. Her husband was alive, but they barely had a second to reconnect before the chilling sound of more zombies echoed down the hallway. Emin quickly grabbed Cheryl and helped her limp away to safety. They found a nearby room to hide in, and just as Emin shut the door behind them, a group of zombies began pounding on it. He pushed a couch in front of the entrance to block it off, then hurried to treat Cheryl's wounds as best he could. While patching her up, Cheryl told him what happened during the chaos and that their daughter had gotten separated. Even worse, their little girl was born mute. She couldn't scream or call for help. That fact alone made Emin and Cheryl's worry even more intense. Emin decided he'd leave Cheryl in the room and go search for their daughter on his own. But outside, the zombie horde was growing. The door was shaking, the couch barely holding, and it was clear being overrun was just a matter of time. Just then, Tamoy, hiding in the room next door, heard Emin's voice through the walls. He instantly knew his buddy was in trouble. Without a second thought, Tamoy made up his mind to risk it all and help. After all, back in the prison, if it hadn't been for Emin watching his back, he might have lost more than just his freedom. He told the boy to stay put, promising that once he created a chance to escape, he'd reunite with Emin right away. After giving the boy clear instructions, Tamoy didn't hesitate. He stepped out into the danger. He grabbed a metal rod and started banging it loudly, making as much noise as possible to draw the zombies away from Emin and Cheryl's door. The plan worked. Soon, a wave of undead began charging straight at him. Without wasting a second, Timoy turned and ran. But luck wasn't on his side. Every door he tried was locked tight. Trapped at the end of the hallway, he realized there was no way out. With nowhere to run, Timoy made a final stand, swinging the metal rod with everything he had. But he wasn't the main character of this story. He couldn't hold them off for long. The horde overwhelmed him. Timoy sacrificed himself to save Emin and his family. And thanks to his bravery, the boy managed to meet up with Emin and Cheryl as planned. But their trouble wasn't over yet. Just as the three were about to make their escape, a new wave of zombies charged up from downstairs. To make matters worse, every door on the floor was locked from the inside. They pounded on door after door. Finally, one door opened. It was a small stairwell room. The man who opened the door was a police chief, and he turned out to be the boy's father. They had barely caught their breath when Cheryl looked up and spotted someone in the crowd. It was her daughter. Against all odds, fate had brought them all together again. Emin and Cheryl found their daughter. The boy found his long-lost father. A reunion years in the making, but it wasn't all joy. Cheryl had never told her daughter the real reason Emin disappeared all those years ago, that he'd gone to prison. Instead, the girl had grown up believing her father had abandoned her. Emin didn't know how to make it right, so he looked into her eyes and gave the only promise he could: "I'll never leave you again." As night fell, the government broadcast a warning. The entire nation had entered a state of emergency. With no solutions in sight, the authorities urged survivors to stay inside and avoid going out. But Cheryl's injuries were severe. If she didn't receive treatment soon, she might not survive. Emin turned to the police chief and explained the situation, stressing that they needed to take Cheryl to get medical help. The chief, however, wasn't keen on just waiting around, knowing that food supplies were running out and staying put would only mean a slow death for everyone. Coincidentally, the chief had heard over the radio about a military-run survivor camp nearby. After a brief discussion, both men agreed that they would leave the apartment at dawn to head there. The others, with no better options, reluctantly agreed. The chief also had a few weapons left, and he handed a handgun to Emin, asking if he knew how to use it. Emin, of course, being a former Special Forces soldier, was more than capable with firearms. With the plan in place, the chief went to his bedroom to check on his son. But when he entered, he found that his son had been bitten by a zombie. The virus had already spread throughout his body, and it was too late for any treatment. The chief was devastated, but he couldn't bring himself to abandon his son. He decided he would take the boy to the survivor camp anyway. In the dead of night, when everyone else was asleep, the chief quietly carried his son out. However, his sneaky actions were noticed by Cheryl, who had woken up just in time to witness the scene. Seeing the boy's strange behavior, she screamed in fear, waking her husband. But before they could react, the boy had fully mutated and lunged at Cheryl. Without hesitation, Emin pulled the trigger and the gunshot echoed through the room, startling the zombies outside. The others awoke in shock, witnessing the tragic sight of the police chief holding his son, now a zombie, in his arms, his son's last breaths rasping as the boy's body twitched uncontrollably. Amid the chaos, Emin quickly reminded everyone that they couldn't stay here any longer. It was no longer safe. But just as they were about to leave, the police chief, in a fit of rage, shouted, "No one is leaving!" The others, terrified, froze, unsure of what to do next. The man, his voice calm but firm, told the chief that his son was no longer human and that it was time to end his suffering. The women, equally horrified by the sight of the twitching boy, agreed it was the right thing to do. But the chief, unable to accept the truth, his anger boiled over and he furiously declared that he would make everyone pay for this. In that moment, overwhelmed by tension, one of the women accidentally caused the gun to misfire as she nervously adjusted it. The shot rang out, and in a split second, the chief, losing all remaining control, raised his gun and shot her dead. In an instant, the woman's husband and the police chief were locked in a fierce struggle. Meanwhile, Emin saw his chance and with precise aim unloaded a full clip into the zombies outside the door, clearing a path for his group to escape. Only the poor man was left behind, tragically shot by the chief in cold blood. The chief's eyes burned with hate, and it was clear that he was far from finished, already savoring the double kill he had claimed. Shortly after escaping, Emin's group found themselves separated from the young couple amidst the chaos. The couple, now cornered by a few zombies, fought desperately to survive. In the struggle, the girl was bitten on her arm. Despite the danger, the boy refused to abandon her. He stayed by her side, and together they were overwhelmed by the zombies. Meanwhile, Emin's family was in their own peril. Their escape route was completely blocked by zombies. In order to protect his wife and daughter, Emin directed them to hide in a nearby corner and bravely face the approaching zombie horde alone. With a gunshot, he drew the zombies toward him, taking them up the stairs to buy his family some time to flee. But soon, Eamon found himself trapped in a dead end. Realizing there was no way out, he chose to stop running and face the zombies head-on. A burst of gunfire quickly wiped out a large group of zombies, but as another wave approached, he hastily reloaded his gun, preparing for the battle that lay ahead. He fought with everything he had, determined to buy his loved ones more time. After emptying the last few rounds from his rifle, Eamon quickly drew his handgun. His marksmanship combined with his agility allowed him to take down one zombie after another with deadly precision. However, the handgun soon ran out of ammo and the corridor was piled high with bodies. Yet, more zombies kept pouring in. Desperate, Eamon pulled out his hidden combat knife and engaged in a brutal melee fight. But after what felt like an eternity of combat, his strength was nearly depleted. As he finally dealt with the zombies in front of him, he turned only to see even more charging toward him. At that point, there was no choice but to retreat. Eamon made his way to the rooftop, but a few zombies quickly followed. Though unarmed, Eamon fought fiercely. But in the chaos, one zombie managed to sneak up behind him, biting into his waist. Despite the excruciating pain, he managed to kill the last zombie in his path. What he didn't know, however, was that while he was fighting for his life, his wife, Cheryl, and daughter had been found by the police chief. The chief, still furious over the death of his zombified son at Eamon's hands, was intent on making Eamon feel the pain of losing his family, despite Cheryl's repeated pleas, explaining that her son had already become a monster. The police chief refused to let them go. In a moment of desperation, the girl shone her flashlight at the police chief, giving Cheryl the chance to charge at him. In the ensuing struggle, as a mother willing to protect her daughter at all costs, Cheryl fought fiercely. In the chaos, she managed to wrestle the police chief's handgun from him and in a swift move turned the tables on him. However, as the daughter attempted to escape, danger struck again. She encountered two zombies along the way. After narrowly dodging their lunges, the girl hurriedly tried to flee, but tripped and fell. The zombies closed in on her, growling and snapping. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Eamon appeared. With a large iron rod, he impaled the zombies. Terrified, the girl darted into a narrow gap to hide. But inside, another zombie was lurking. Eamon, too large to fit through the small opening, signaled for his daughter to try and climb out on her own. With her father urging her on, she waited for the perfect moment when the zombie wasn't looking and sprinted out. The father and daughter embraced, unaware that another zombie was closing in behind them. At the last second, Cheryl arrived just in time to fire and kill the zombie. After everything they'd been through, separated by life and death, they were finally reunited. They hurriedly made their way through the basement and reached the exit. It was then that Eamon confessed he had been bitten by a zombie. To prevent harming his wife and daughter, he had no choice but to stay behind. He mentioned that outside there was a prison transport vehicle and they could drive it to the survivor camp. Cheryl stood frozen for a moment, her mind struggling to process the reality of the situation. She couldn't believe it and clung to the hope that maybe the camp had a way to treat him. After everything they had gone through, after finally reuniting, they were a complete family again. She didn't want her husband to leave her once more. But Eamon knew the truth. The virus spread too quickly, and even if the camp had a vaccine, he wouldn't make it in time. The harsh reality weighed heavily on them both, and Cheryl reluctantly accepted the grim situation. Tearfully, their daughter hugged Eamon and said her goodbyes. Then, with a heavy heart, they left the basement, climbed into the prison transport vehicle, and drove away. Soon, Eamon's mind began to cloud over, and he lost control of his own thoughts. Yet, in his final moments before fully transforming, he still gripped tightly onto the family